Kai. Look, we all love a good protagonist moment. The training arc pays off, the theme song kicks in, the hero punches above their weight class, and the crowd goes wild. Beautiful, inspirational, predictable, but now and then a villain walks on screen and does something so catastrophically, overwhelmingly dominant that the main character might as well not even be in the episode. These are those moments. The villain flexes that broke the scale, rewrote the power ceiling, and left me speechless, wondering if the good guys even had a chance. Let's get into it. Pretty obvious, and you knew I would put this one on this list. Every ninja village on the planet has put aside centuries of bad blood to form one unified army. Tens of thousands of shinobi side by side, ready for war, and Madara Uchiha drops onto the battlefield like he's visiting a petting zoo. I remember watching this arc and physically leaning back from my screen because the man wasn't fighting an army, he was giving a masterclass in humiliation. Susanoo after Susanoo, meteor after meteor falling from the sky, sword combos that turned entire battalions into dust. No one could touch him. Not the Kage, not the tacticians, not the sheer weight of numbers. Madara turned what should have been humanity's finest hour into a live demonstration of why he was the most feared name in shinobi history. And the worst part? He was enjoying every second of it. Smiling, taunting, practically yawning. That's not a villain's entrance. That's a mythology walking into a world that forgot what real power looked like.
さて、2個目はどうする？大野木。奴らだ。4時の方向。6トン樹海降壇。6トンまで。どうやここまでのようだ。ついに会えたな、ディオ。おめでとうポルナレフその階段を2段降りろ再び私の仲間にしてやる逆に死にたければ足を上げて階段を登れどうした動揺しているぞポルナレフバカな俺は今確かに階段を登った
I've seen a lot of intimidation tactics in anime, but nothing has ever matched the quiet, surgical cruelty of Dio on that staircase. Polnareff charges up, fueled by grief and rage, sword drawn, every ounce of resolve pushing him forward, and he ends up right back at the bottom. Again and again. No explosion, no flashy beam, just the sickening realization that time itself is working against you and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. I find this moment so unsettling because Dio doesn't even break a sweat. He doesn't monologue about his grand plan or gloat like a cartoon villain. He just lets the hopelessness speak for itself. Polnareff's legs are moving, his will is unbroken, but the universe itself has been bent around one man's ego. I genuinely felt claustrophobic watching it. You're trapped in a loop you can't see, fighting a battle you've already lost. That's the kind of villain flex that doesn't need volume, it needs silence.
てめえのスタンドの正体を見極めてから死んでやるぜならばしょうがない死ぬしかないなポルナレフそれがザ・ワールドか来い無駄な
感じないか黒崎上に出現したねやつを
ルキア
レンジ
やれやれ潰さないようにアリを踏むのは力の加減が難しいんだ
Okay, so this one lives in a category entirely its own, because Aizen didn't just overpower a character, he overpowered the soundtrack. If you know Bleach, you know number one is Ichigo's anthem. The moment it kicks in, it's hype, it's victory, it's the audience collectively losing their minds, and Aizen made it stop mid-track. Just like that, the music dies, and so does every shred of confidence you had in the protagonist. That is a villain's flex so meta, it transcends the fourth wall. Most villains beat heroes physically. Aizen beat the entire viewing experience. He looked at the narrative itself and said, no, not today. I still think about how surgically Kubo orchestrated that scene. The silence after the music cuts is louder than any explosion. It tells you everything. This isn't a fight Ichigo can win with willpower and a bigger sword. The rules have changed, and the person who changed them is standing right there, completely unbothered.
いちご、レンジ、体が動かん。
僕の冷圧に当てられて体が弛緩してしまっているのか。君たちの役目は終わりだ。
役目だと。
実際邸内侵入後の君たちの活躍は素晴らしかったよ。実に動きやすかった。
どういう。
来るぞ。さあ目覚めろエアよ。お前にふさわしき舞台が整った。いざ仰げエヌマエリシュー。
Rider's Ayanoi Heteroi is one of the most breathtaking noble phantasms in the entire Fate franchise, an infinite desert, an army of loyal warriors who transcended death itself to fight beside their king. It's Alexander the Great's legacy made manifest, and it is glorious, and Gilgamesh drowned it in golden light without flinching. I remember expecting a clash, a war of attrition, something. Instead, the gates of Babylon opened and it was just over. Thousands of weapons raining from portals in the sky, each one a legendary artifact, and Gil, dude barely moved his fingers. It wasn't the spectacle that hit hard, it was Rider's face, the king of conquerors, a man who never backed down, who charged headlong into impossible odds with a grin, and even he understood. There was no conquering this. Gilgamesh stood at the top not because he earned it through struggle, he stood there because in his world, everything already belonged to him. That kind of arrogance shouldn't work, but somehow it absolutely does. Luffy has been punched, poisoned, frozen, and thrown into the ocean more times than I can count, and every single time he gets back up. That's the deal with Luffy. That's his whole thing. He doesn't stay down. So when Kaido swung that club and put Luffy flat on the ground, unconscious, defeated, gear fourth deflated like a popped balloon, I sat there genuinely stunned. One hit, one swing. 20-plus years of watching this rubber boy defy every odd in existence, and a drunk dragon on a rooftop ended it in a single motion. Oda didn't cushion the blow with a dramatic clash or a back-and-forth exchange. He let the impact land raw, and that's what made it so effective. Kaido wasn't introduced as a threat through exposition or hype from side characters. Oh no. He was introduced through result, the strongest man alive, proven in real time. No speech, no build-up monologue, just a club and the cold ground. Sometimes the scariest thing a villain can do is make the impossible look routine.
死に場所を求める男の名は百獣のカイドウ。差しでやるならカイドウだろう。口々に人は言う。
If you are having fun, please give this video a like and consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks!
時は来た。その扉を人柱諸君を使い今ここで開く。
さらばだ諸君。
お前、
神を手に入れた私は今や手のひらで太陽を作ることさえ可能なのだ。
There's a specific kind of horror that comes from watching a villain operate on a completely different scale than anything you've prepared for. Father had been this quiet, almost bureaucratic presence for most of Brotherhood, pulling strings, speaking softly, sitting on his throne like a patient chess player. And then he held a miniature sun in his palm. I still get chills thinking about the framing of that shot. Everyone else in the room is struggling with alchemy, fighting tooth and nail for survival, and this man casually compresses the power of a star between his fingers like it's a stress ball. The gap between Father and the rest of the cast wasn't just large, it was cosmic. I love how this moment recontextualizes every victory the heroes had up to that point. All those battles, all those sacrifices, and the final boss is holding the power of God with the same effort I used to hold a coffee cup. Brotherhood earned that escalation through patience, and the payoff was absolutely staggering.
懐かしいね。おやつの入った。
お前たちヒーローはこの日のために多くの過程を積み重ねてきたのじゃろう。じゃが今、死柄木弔は起きた。
For the longest time, I honestly underestimated Shigaraki. He was twitchy, unstable, hiding behind his master's shadow, and I kept waiting for him to either grow up or get replaced by a more competent threat. And then his quirk awakened, and a city started dissolving. Not crumbling, dissolving. Everything his decay touched spread like a plague, chewing through concrete, steel, and people with zero discrimination. Buildings folded in on themselves. The ground cracked open in radiating waves. Heroes who had been holding their own seconds earlier were suddenly scrambling to survive. Not to win, just to not die. Horikoshi turned a character I'd half written off into something genuinely terrifying in the span of a few chapters. That's not a power-up, that's a reinvention. And honestly, it worked better than it had any right to.
ぶっ壊れろ。
はい。まずい。推し量るにこの式神の能力はあらゆる事象への適応見せてくれたな伏黒恵。領域展開福間水氏。
Shibuya was already a nightmare. Curses everywhere, sorcerers dropping left and right, the entire district descending into organized hell. And then Sukuna opened his domain, and the nightmare got a promotion. Malevolent Shrine doesn't trap you inside a barrier like other domains. It unfolds out raw, no walls, no ceiling, just a radius of guaranteed annihilation expanding across Shibuya like a wound opening in the city itself. I watched that sequence 3 times before it fully registered. The buildings didn't explode. They were carved apart, systematically by invisible slashes that respected nothing. Civilians, infrastructure, none of it mattered. Sukuna's flex so haunting isn't the body count though, it's the indifference. He did all of this as a side thought. Shibuya wasn't a battlefield for him. It was an inconvenience he cleaned up while his real attention was somewhere else entirely. That level of casual devastation is what separates a strong strong antagonist from an existential one.
ほう、何かしたな。見えてるな、俺の術が。フーガ。
人間はやはり終わるべきだ。なるほど。それでは私を殺すことはできない。
Gintama is the show that taught an entire generation that comedy and heartbreak can share the same sentence. So when the farewell Shinsengumi arc rolled around and Utsuro stepped into frame, I expected the usual emotional gut punch wrapped in a joke. Instead, I got something far worse. A villain who made every strong character in the series look like they were standing still. Gintoki, Shinsengumi elites, people who had been carrying the weight of the story for hundreds of episodes, and Utsuro moved through them like they were scenery. No effort, no urgency, no recognition that they were even a threat. The scariest part was realizing this wasn't arrogance. Utsuro is a man who has died and returned so many times that combat holds no meaning for him. He's not flexing, he's just existing, and that existence alone outclasses everyone around him. In a series famous for making you laugh until you cry, Utsuro made me hold my breath. That quiet shift in tone is peak Gintama, and I'll defend that take forever.
Dancho!
俺たちはあの怪物一人に滅ぼされる。
この騎士をドラゴンを前にするのは初めてだ。
わしの圧におじけづいたか。
試練一戦。
Look, when Arthur fought Dragon, David Production didn't just cook, they burned the entire Michelin star kitchen down to the bedrock. It starts as a standard shonen skirmish, rapidly escalates into a literal world-rending, atmospheric, piercing fever dream of absolute cinema. We have Dragon, our dude who breathes despair and tanks ultimate attacks like they're gentle summer breezes. Then we have Arthur, our resident delusional himbo who genuinely believes he is a knight, and because of how firepower system works, his sheer unadulterated delusion makes him god tier. This wasn't just a fight, it was a philosophical debate solved by bisecting the earth. The sound design alone requires a fresh pair of pants. Every time Excalibur swung, the bass drop sent my soul to the Adola lick. It's peak anime absurdity executed with the highest tier of Sakuga imaginable. And that's the list. 10 moments where the villain walked in, took every expectation we had, and threw it into the sun. Sometimes literally. The best antagonists don't just challenge the hero. They challenge the audience's faith that the hero can win at all. And honestly, that's what makes us come back for more. If you've got a villain flex I missed that still lives rent-free in your head, drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next one.